The Australian election this year is kind of igniting a really interesting dynamic in crypto regulation, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's pretty fascinating. Despite the election chatter, crypto seems to be getting its long awaited attention. Yep.
Exactly. Regardless of who comes out on top, both the Labour Party and the Liberals are committed to pushing forward pro crypto
Mm-hmm.
laws. They finally plan to draft legislation that consults with industry insiders.
That's right. And it's interesting how the debate isn't front and center during the campaign, even though it's been such a long kept issue. The industry folks like Adrian Priscillosny even called it a missed opportunity to make it a headline.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. In February, there were reports about 2 million pro crypto voters, which could have swayed the election. But frankly, neither side wanted to polarize the electorate by going too niche, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at what's happening behind the scenes, the Treasury is almost doubling its digital asset team, gearing up with draft bills on regulating digital asset platforms and modernizing payment systems this quarter.
Right. And that shows the government's cautious yet determined effort to provide the crypto industry with long needed certainty. It's like they've been sitting on the sidelines for more than a decade, and now they're finally in the game.
Exactly. And speaking of timeframes, Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor promised to get draft crypto regulations out within the first 100 days if he were in power. That's a pretty swift turnaround compared to the ALP's slower approach, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And then there's this interesting point by Amy Rose Goody, CEO of the Digital Economy Council, who mentioned that both parties are really on the same page, which is surprising given their usual differences.
For sure, it's quite rare to see such bipartisan agreement. It's almost like the crypto world is finally getting the message, and the regulatory framework is catching up, even if slowly.
Right, and let's not forget the industry's perspective here. People like Caroline Bowler from BTC Markets have noted that a pro crypto stance from um, perhaps even a Trump like administration abroad pushed both sides to finally take crypto seriously here.
That's an interesting angle. The international pressure or competitive mindset definitely plays a role. They're not
Yeah,
just regulating for regulation's sake, but because they see big economic opportunities.
yeah, exactly. Treasurer Jim Chalmers even called digital assets big opportunities for our economy. I mean, it's like Australia wants to harness innovation while making sure there's consumer protection and safety in the mix.
True, and that balance is critical. But I do wonder, will the cautious, slow pace of the ALP really leave the industry satisfied? Some critics argue that a 3 year delay is simply too long and it risks pushing talent to, more agile jurisdictions like Singapore or the UAE.
I get what you're saying, and it's a bit of a catch 22. On one hand, you need robust, consumer oriented protections, but on the other, industry momentum is being lost. The opposition,
True.
through figures like Luke Howarth, has been pushing for a faster approach.
Right, and that's where the debate gets lively. Howarth pointed out that the Albanese government was slow to react, only showing a placeholder document after the FTX collapse. That's not exactly inspiring confidence, is it?
No, it isn't. And it's interesting because the industry is loudly saying we need action and we need it now. That's why initiatives like the Crypto Asset Task Force have been proposed to involve both industry and consumer voices early on.
Yeah, and that task force idea coming in the first 100 days sounds promising to build some real momentum. But then there's also the ASIC factor with its own proposals, which means it's not just a legislative issue, but a regulatory body acting within its own mandate.
Exactly. ASIC, despite being independent, like the US SEC, but in an Australian context, is expected to stick to its rules even if new laws roll out. It's interesting because that means any legislative changes have to be in harmony with the regulatory framework already in place.
So, in a way, even if the political parties agree on crypto regulation, real transformation might still depend on how well ASIC and the Treasury coordinate. It's like orchestrating a symphony with many players.
Absolutely. It's like they're all part of this delicate balancing act. And minor parties like the Libertarian Party are even putting forward detailed policies. They're calling for a national Bitcoin reserve and legal tender status for Bitcoin, even though they're, well, pretty small on the Senate.
Yes, that's a whole other layer. It shows that while the major parties are converging, niche players are still vocal, which speaks to the diversity within the crypto community.
Right? And then you have the differing perspectives on debanking and CBDCs, like the positions held by One Nation versus the more tech forward view of the digital councils. It's a vibrant ecosystem of opinions and proposals.
Exactly. And what's really refreshing is that despite all these varied voices, the common thread is that Australia is finally set on a path towards providing regulatory clarity in 2025. That's a huge step compared to the previous decade of inaction.
Totally. And it seems that the industry feels they're in a much stronger position now, thanks to these recent efforts, sort of moving from a brain drain situation to an environment ripe for
Yeah,
innovation.
yeah, exactly. And it makes you wonder how this will reshape investment and innovation in the region. It's like a long anticipated gate finally swinging open.
Right? And further down the line, this could also position Sydney as one of the more crypto friendly cities globally, which adds another interesting twist. It's kind of like Australia's finally saying, hey, we want to be part of this digital revolution.
Absolutely. But I do want to challenge one aspect. While both parties agree on the need for regulation, some critics argue that a consensus might water down the specificity needed to truly foster innovation or adequately address risks. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Sometimes the broad bipartisan approach could result in regulations that are too generic. But on the other hand, it does mean there's political will, and that's a huge step forward from inaction.
Good point. It's kind of like the trade off between customization and the necessity of having a workable framework in place.
Exactly. And industry leaders seem cautiously optimistic. They're thinking if the draft legislation finally comes out and exchanges detailed feedback, it could very well strike that balance.
Hmm.
It's all about iterative improvement.
And with calls from groups like Stand with Crypto and voices like Coinbase's John O'Loughlin urging decisive action, there's definitely some pressure on whoever wins to not dither too long.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, come 2025, we either have clear rules or risk falling further behind global leaders. It's a make or break moment for Australia's crypto landscape.
Definitely. And I guess in that light, even a minority government working together could still pass bipartisan crypto legislation, right?
Right, because the major votes could be pulled together. And that unity is almost ironic given the usual partisan divides. But it shows that crypto is finally becoming an issue that transcends the political spectrum.
For sure. And it highlights how technology and financial innovation can push traditional politics into new territories. It's a real paradigm shift.
Absolutely. And it's really exciting to see, despite the occasional delays in placeholder documents, now there's a serious push to integrate digital assets into the broader economic framework with proper safeguards.
Yeah, and it's this commitment to both innovation and regulation that makes the future of crypto in Australia feel more promising and stable. It'll be interesting to see how all this develops as the legislation gets refined.
No doubt about that. The next few months will be crucial. The policy drafts, the task force proposals, and ultimately the legal framework that will set the tone for Australia's digital asset future. It's kind of like watching a nation
Absolutely.
take its first tentative steps into a bold new financial frontier.
Exactly. And whether you're a crypto enthusiast or just curious about how regulation evolves, this is definitely something to keep an eye on. Cheers to a dynamic future ahead.